The following program is rated G and is suitable for viewing by all ages.
All right, you good to go then? Yeah. Sweet. All right, guys. Oh, we're just heading out.
Begging, are you? Oh, come on, you guys are begging. No. Jesus.
Hey,
no, you guys are pieces.
You, man.
Hey, we off.
Makes you boss.
Excuse me. Can you just mind your business?
Mother.
Business. Can you guys get off the property, please? Off the property.
For what? What?
I work here.
What?
Yeah.
Because you're harassing people.
Send someone over to our Send one person over our
Can you please just get off the property, please?
you.
Let's go. Come on.
What?
Because you're harassing people,
What are you
okay?
doing?
Please.
Do you need supplies?
Get out of here.
Okay.
I don't know what Shut the up and
What?
just mind your business.
What?
Minding your business would be carrying on and walking down the street, my friends. Bye-bye.
Come on, shut up. Come on.
See, you just gotta love the respect here on the street. Hey, put that on your documentary.
Yeah, this happened.
Maybe we should just hang out for a second.
Yeah, I want to. I want to wait.
I don't want to leave them with.
I want to wait till they leave.
Yeah.
As part of this documentary, we wanted to explore homelessness, the people who experience it, and those within the organizations that contribute basically their livelihoods to supporting those individuals.
We joined the Night Reach team as part of the Turning Point Society for a night. Turning Point's a harm reduction agency in the city of Red Deer, and Night Reach is a team of people that go out every evening to offer various supports to their clients, which are people experiencing homelessness typically.
It was legit minus 25 that night, and after an hour, my legs were freezing. I can't even imagine what it's like for the individuals experiencing homelessness who face these kinds of conditions all the time.
Just before we were leaving for the night, 3 men jumped out of a pickup truck parked right outside the Turning Point building. One of them started swearing at both the staff and the clients that were sitting there. And the staff told us that this isn't an uncommon experience for them. They did say it's the minority of people that'll have this kind of reaction. They really stressed that was the case, but they did acknowledge that it is a vocal minority.
Yeah, it was the craziest thing that I've ever seen in my life. It definitely made us want to dive real deep into this topic.
We have definitely built a lot of rapport with our clients that I see every day, that like every single client that was on the deck just now I know from the office during the day. But there are actually some clients that only Night Reach sees, which is kind of interesting. And that's why I think rapport building is such an important part of harm reduction, because they not only do they recognize our bags, because usually, like we said, Kelsey said, there's about 15 or so of us, but our bags they always recognize. They usually call us like the red bag people. So they'll see the bags and then they'll come running. Yeah.
It's Richard, right?
It is Richard. Do you want a snack, Richard? Gummies, you said?
Sure.
These are some of the hardest nights because we don't have like the things that people need to get through the night a lot of the time, like gloves or, warm clothes.
Yeah, unfortunately we're out of gloves at the moment too.
Yeah,
so.
and we, we just don't have the capacity to carry warm clothing and stuff like that. I feel a lot of frustration because I feel like a lot of the stories we hear are like their problems are systemic problems, things that could easily be solved.
Yes. I think the most important thing, especially about the type of clients that we serve, a lot of things that most people don't think about is that they are just people. Like, they are just like me and you talking. They are just regular human beings. Just going through their life.
I think that, like, a lot of people believe that people choose this life, and that this is how they want to live. But I can't believe that anyone would choose this in a place like Alberta, where it gets to be minus 40 in the winter. You know, like, there are so many barriers in the way of people getting out of this situation once they're in it, and so I think that's a huge misconception.
So our office / us on Nightreach, we're kind of like a safe space for a lot of our clients. So they feel comfortable talking to us and being around us, and I have some amazing relationships with a lot of clients that I see, and they've made just as much of an impact on my life as I have on theirs. Actually, one of my very first shifts ever, I worked on Nightreach. I was with a fellow named Mike, who is an amazing, amazing, amazing man. He still works Nightreach. He has, I think, been the longest, him and Laura have been the longest with Nightreach, I think 5-6 years. But yeah, I was working with him, and we had come across a client who had just been assaulted with a bat, and he was bleeding, like his head was bleeding, and he had like blood all over the one side of his face. And this was probably, I think, my second or third shift ever. And we were concerned about him, but he was actually only concerned about how cold it was outside. For us, he was concerned that we weren't warm enough. And I thought that was really kind of an eye-opening thing to think about, where, you know, he literally just got assaulted and he was bleeding, like literally bleeding. But he was the one worried about us. And that stuck with me ever since. I think about him every day, I would say.
Do you know where he is today?
I actually don't. That was the one and only time I have ever met him. As Kelsey actually mentioned already, my mother, when I started working for Turning Point, she asked, because she actually wasn't sure, because she didn't know. She asked me if, you know, I was ever concerned, or if I was concerned about, you know, possible, like an altercation between me and a client, for an example. And I think she asked me after I had worked for Turning Point for about a week. And even then I was like, oh, like, no, I'm not concerned at all. So I think the biggest misconception is that people think that our clients are dangerous. They are not. They are not at all. They are beautiful, wonderful, amazing human beings, and they have so much life to give and so much of a story to tell, that if people just listened, they would be, I don't know, they'd be heartbroken, for one, about their stories, because a lot of our clients' stories are very sad. But nobody really listens to them. So I think if people sat down and, you know, had a coffee with the client, they would understand a lot more of what they go through on a daily basis. And they might be a little less likely to jump onto Facebook and be negative. I found a lot of my first few months here, I spent a lot of time outside of work thinking about work and worrying about the clients. I mean, I still do it now, but I try to limit it a little bit, because it's not very good self-care to be working when you're not at work. But I find I do that a lot, where it'll happen where I'll meet somebody, I won't see him ever again, or I might see him like 6-7 months later. Because sometimes they come and go. They'll kind of stay in Red Deer for a couple days, and then they'll go down to Edmonton, Calgary, or Lethbridge, and then, you know, we're left wondering if they're okay, wondering where they went, and it happens very, very often.
And frankly, we've lost a lot of people, especially last year, it seems.
Yeah, we actually, at Safe Harbor here, a few weeks ago, we held a sharing circle for some of the clients that we lost last year. And I think in a 6 or 7 month span, there was 26? Yeah, I think 26 names of people that had died. And that wasn't even in the year, that was probably in the last half of the year.
During our evening with the Night Reach team, we ended up at the city's temporary homeless shelter, which is operated by the Safe Harbor Society. There, we spoke with Kath Hoffman.
I'm the executive director at Safe Harbor, informally known as the captain at the harbor.
You're the captain. How long have you been in this captain position here at Safe Harbor?
Well, I can't believe it, but this month it will be 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and when I started, I didn't have any wrinkles. So that'll tell you a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
She started in the retail industry, but shifted her career. In the 90s, she worked with the Central Alberta AIDS Network, a mobile needle exchange program. What I noticed about her and others in this field is that even though she works in such a heavy industry, she still brought a warmth I didn't really expect. She was actually pretty funny.
In the retail world, I was supposed to wear pantyhose every day. That was my biggest driving thing. Like, I got to get out of here.
Exactly.
As you can tell by looking at me, it doesn't fit, right? So that was a big push, and I was fascinated. I thought, what a cool thing to do, to be able to help people, right? And like I said, I kind of bought into that idea. I was literally, and excuse the pun, I was hooked. Safe Harbor is this community, Central Alberta's community, who are providing resources, services to people experiencing homelessness, poverty, chronic addiction. So we run the gamut of intoxicated shelter to medically supported detox, outreach, housing assessment. We have a wonderful Indigenous program. And so our services are aligned to first of all, in that shelter, to meet people where they're at. And then ideally have those resources follow people as they move forward on whatever recovery journey they might be contemplating. Yeah, so we're there on the front lines and doing the best we can to keep our light shining in some pretty dark spaces of our community. Yeah.
Safe Harbor Society's shelter used to be just 26 beds. They later got provincial funding for temporary trailers in the parking lot, increasing the capacity to 150 people. When COVID hit, the shelter moved into an old bingo hall across the street due to physical distancing requirements. That's where the shelter is to this day. An overdose prevention site sits next door to the shelter. That site was opened by the provincial government in 2018.
My gosh, and it's changed so much. Shelter in the last 10 years has changed. Whoa. When we first started, we've always operated in Talk Shelter at Safe Harbor. We've been operating that program for 20 years. When we were doing that for people who were primarily using alcohol and crack, was a way different gig than it is now. Those substances and the behaviors associated with those substances, like crystal meth, has done such damage to people. And of course, the opioid poisoning crisis that we've been in since, we first started seeing signs of that in 2016, and how that has just, exploded. So there has been so many times where I've just thought, okay, we're done. Like, are we done? We're done. We can't, we're overwhelmed. Just like everybody else, every other service provider. We're overwhelmed. What are we doing? But always, it's the need that's right in front of your face that you can't ignore, you can't ignore it. And you have to just keep fighting. And it's certainly, without a doubt, it is the incredible crew that I have every day and night, working so hard, tirelessly, to stand beside people who many others can't. And I found this expression a few years ago called moral injury. And it just piqued my interest, and I thought, what is this moral injury? And I found out that moral injury is something that happens to us when we have to do something that goes against our belief system. And I first got my taste of that back in the olden days when we had shelter out of our trailers and bits and pieces in this building and in those trailers. And we had to, lack of capacity, turn people away from shelter in the winter, overnight. And I had to tell my staff that they had to do that because we have a fire code. Of course, we're always under a microscope, everything we're doing here. And you think, okay, the needs of the many compared to the needs of the one, because if we got shut down because we had too many people, we're going to lose the whole thing. And I had to tell my staff, you have to do this. I was inflicting a moral injury on them. I had it been inflicted on me through that and passed it on to them. And it was horrible. It's those things, and we see this daily. And I warn my staff, when you come, you want to help, you're going to want to help buddy this much, because that's how much he needs, right? But really, you're going to help this much. But this much, when you have nothing, is everything. And that's that mission. That's why our mission statement is so simple, of welcome, like genuine welcome and connection. Because in the end of it all, sometimes that's all we can do, but it's everything. People who are active in their addiction don't have a lot of supports around them. And that's not because people won't help them, it's because they can't. They don't have the capacity. For that group of people, our mission statement is to provide spaces of welcome and connection, which seems trite, but with that group of people, it's everything. And so we are there standing beside them at the ready whenever they have that idea of, hey, I'm getting tired of this, I need something else. Our staff and certainly our wraparound supports that we have inside of our shelter are right there to make sure that we can help them on their next steps. So yeah, that frontline service is, it's critical. You know how hard it is to be empathetic to that dork that just smashed my truck to smithereens? Like, okay, Hoffman, with your addiction talk and your heart and everything else, who's gonna fix my truck? You know what I mean? I get that. All the businesses, that have to be beside us as we're trying to provide service in buildings that are temporary and not purpose-built and everything else. And they have to put up with, all of this stuff. You know what? Just last week I had 2 staff vehicles get smashed outside the shelter, right? We experience the same things the businesses are getting. And I totally get where those businesses are coming from. I do, 100%. And yet, it's not just a safe harbor problem. It's not just safe harbor that has to come together to fix this. And it's not, everywhere, as I said, Canadian Mental Health, RCMP, hospital, us, street clinic, everybody's overwhelmed, right? There's no places, everything's full, everything's, we're all overwhelmed. So it's the systems trauma where I get the most moral injury from. By the time they get here and into the shelter, they are, they're so sick. They're so disconnected. They're connected to their street buddies, usually, ideally. But as far as the rest of the community, they are very disconnected. They're shunned, they're ostracized, they're blamed, they're judged. They can't be welcomed.
While we were at the shelter, Hoffman was able to connect us with someone who experiences homelessness. What do you like to do for fun?
I don't have fun anymore. What do I like to do for fun? Hell, I don't do anything anymore.
Yeah.
I don't drive anymore because I'm in the city.
Right.
Take the bus. Take the bus anywhere. I don't drink anymore. I don't do drugs anymore. I don't smoke anymore. I smoke a little bit. Never thought I'd ever be homeless. I've always thought, I had a good life. I always worked, I always had a good job. Money in the bank. I had 3 different pensions and all that. And I just made a bad investment.
How important is this space for you?
Oh my God, I camped. I camped for, oh God, last winter I camped, it was minus 39 and it was damn cold. This building and or Safe Harbor, when it's warm up time, it's a godsend for a lot of people. They help so many people here. And one thing I found out about Red Deer is you never go hungry. There's so many great people here. Then they really look after them. I mean, they really care for the homeless. They are just amazing. They run when they hear somebody goes down. These people, they just have an order. There was one person died in my apartment from overdose in the bathroom. Nobody knew he was in there. And we did CPR on him for 25 minutes before the ambulance got there, and they did it on him for another 25 minutes before they announced that he passed. And that was the hardest one. It can happen anywhere, anytime, and it has.
You were saying some misconceptions that people have. What are some of the misconceptions?
The number one I know is that people are confused by what we're doing in the shelter and what we're doing in the overdose prevention site, because those two programs, just like this, right? They're just together. So the biggest misconception people have is that first of all, the OPS overdose prevention site is providing drugs to people so they can go in there and use them. For us in the shelter, the misconception seems to be that because we have this service and people are in it, that we should be able to lock them in there, so that they're not going out in the community, they're not making a mess, they're not, they're staying put in that shelter. Or, why on earth, when there's this great big huge shelter, do we have people camping outside? What's up with that, right? So people just think that's stupid. Why aren't they in the shelter, okay? What's the use of the shelter if they're not going in there? And so people choose to be outside because they have their own private space, just like we want. So it's really hard for people to understand, especially people, I used to think that too. I used to think, okay, when I was in high school, and I lived through the 70s, okay? So we were all experimenting with everything, and I always thought after, how come that didn't stick with all of us? If substances, this is what other people think, that substances are what cause an addiction. And that certain drugs have this superpower to make people addicted. And so if that's the case, why didn't we all get addicted in the 70s, right? Why didn't we? Some people did. And that's the difference, is what are you using the substance for? We forget to look at not the substance, but what's driving that addiction. Because the substance is just a symptom. The addiction is a symptom. And that's what, is a misconception. The other thing, people think, okay, they're going to come to detox. Okay, good. Then they should be good. Right? Well, no. That's 7 to 10 day stay, for somebody who's been responding to life for 30 years in a, unhealthy way. 7 to 10 days. Man, sometimes it takes like 3-4 months to get your brain to even wake up to where you are and what you're doing. So that residential treatment step for people experiencing homelessness helps a lot, right? That length of time, that level of support, great. But that's the other thing people think. Okay, then they're good. They're good then, right? But if you think about it, in that environment, they're good, right? What happens all of a sudden? First of all of the people they were connected to were probably actively using substances. How do I have a relationship? Where are people that are going to help me right now? Because I can't hang out with my friends anymore. I can't go back to where, there's so many things that have to happen through that continuum. And the most critical thing is to have that support with them all the way through.
We wanted to chat with a mental health professional about the struggles people who experience homelessness face. Tammy Rogers has worked with vulnerable populations for 30 years. This includes the Indigenous community, victims of human trafficking, and individuals struggling with their mental health and access to housing.
There's a lot of homelessness in Red Deer. There's, lack of space for folks that are experiencing homelessness that have co-occurring disorders. There's lots of mental health issues that homeless folks experience, and not necessarily the resources for that. So when you have folks that are experiencing some significant mental health issues, it's not available. The help isn't available quickly. And so one of the things that we've talked about is, so you go to shelter and they help you to get connected and set up, appointments to do things. But what happens when you don't know what day it is, let alone what time it is, and your life is in chaos? So you're not going to remember that you have an appointment if somebody can't remind you. And with so many people going in and out of shelter, it's really hard for the staff to be able to manage that in a good way. And so it just creates this ongoing cycle. And I've been doing a lot of work in the Indigenous communities in Red Deer, and really learning about how it is different for folks from an Indigenous background, and how intergenerational trauma really plays a role in that. So residential school and 60s scoop really stunted the way Indigenous people raised their children and raised their families. When the children were taken from that environment, they were put into these schools. We're going to call them schools, but it was really an institution. It was really a jail. They didn't get love. They didn't get hugged. They were beaten senseless for speaking their language, even though they didn't know how to speak English necessarily. They weren't allowed to return home to their families. There was all kinds of physical, emotional, mental, sexual abuse. So you have this whole generation of folks who no longer know how to raise a family, who don't know how to interact in a way that isn't fraught with abuse, that, hunger isn't something that is normal. And so you now have people raising children who are suffering from the effects of whatever abuse they suffered. When you don't know and you don't have the capability to get there, it creates this other cycle. So you turn to alcohol, you turn to drugs. That's just a normal part of the cycle. And so because we haven't been raised with those coping mechanisms, you turn to all kinds of, you turn back to the things that you know. Trauma is something that happens to us that changes who we are as a person. But what people don't recognize is, with the right supports, we can work through that trauma and change how we react to things. And so not everyone who is a substance user, or whatever that looks like, experience trauma on the same level. The difference is your ability to be able, your resiliency and your coping skills to be able to understand that you can make different choices, and to be able to put those actions into your life and recognize when you're triggered and when something happens, to not fall back into those same patterns. And how do you build up that resiliency to recognize? I say to folks a lot, you're cutting a new path. So we're walking through we're walking through a field with grass that's up to our shoulders, and we come to a boulder. Is it easier to go back the way that we came and find a different route? 100% it is. But for true change to happen, you need to find a way to navigate around that boulder to continue to cut that new path for yourself, so that you recognize that whatever stumbling block comes into your path, you can continue forward. You don't have to go back.
In 2011, Red Deer RCMP developed the Police and Crisis Team, better known as the PACT team, to answer calls related to mental health.
I work as obviously a police officer that responds to calls for service. However, the difference is that I actually work with a registered psych nurse, and together we respond to calls that are related to mental health or that police officers that are already there believe we might be able to help. So it actually creates a more holistic approach to a call that involves mental health, and we know, right, that a lot of them do. And that's in a nutshell, I guess, what we do. We try to go there and provide that gateway to access care, the care that people might need.
It's a very interesting job. I've done a lot of different things in my career, but nothing quite like this. Trying to help those in crisis is difficult work, but it's also rewarding work.
So prior to the PACT team, how many years had you been working in your field?
Oh, put it this way, I've hit my 30-year mark of nursing, okay?
Okay. As a police officer, what types of training do you receive to join the PACT team?
So we do have available to us some online courses. They're pretty extensive and they're very well done. Courses such as excited delirium or crisis management, de-escalation, things of that nature. But the most important training is the one we get on the job. And what I mean by that is, besides my experience as a general duty police officer, which I did for around 6.5 years, it's also the training I get when I work with my nurse. So we can have a debrief after the call for service or any interaction with one of our clients, and my nurse will explain to me, given her vast knowledge, okay, well, this person had these needs because this is how this mental disorder or mental health issue presents normally, and you build that education as you go. It's also a de-escalation factor. So sometimes people just simply don't want to talk to the police, whether it be from a bad experience in the past or a bias that they have towards it, or just the perception of things, my friends shouldn't see me talking to the police. Well, now you're talking to a nurse. Now you're speaking with them. And they can really talk to them about their symptoms, what they're feeling, try to understand the issue more from a medical point of view than what I would understand, right?
Yeah.
So after having 20-something years without a police officer as a partner and now with a police officer as a partner, how's that different for you?
I'm old school, so it was a learning curve for me. I had to learn that I wasn't the first person to the door, that there were some safety protocols, because I was used to doing those things, right? As an outreach nurse, we would go ourselves and knock on the doors. If things got a little sideways, then I would phone the police. So yes, it was a learning curve for me also to look at safety in a different way, and also having a partner in that communication when it comes to servicing clients, right? Yeah, you have to learn what he brings to the table and what I bring to the table, and I think we work well together. So,
what kinds of calls do you respond to, if you can give some examples?
So it's kind of anything. It could be something as simple as a noise disturbance or an assault in progress, right? It's a very wide range of calls. The reason being is, as we develop our understanding of mental health and society as a whole develops it and we progress, we understand that a lot of these issues are generated from perhaps a traumatic past or some other type of mental health issue that presented that day, and they might need us. So honestly, we do respond to just a variety of calls for service. Of course, if an offense of some kind took place, that must be dealt with, and it's in the interest of the public and it's law enforcement. However, if we can recognize that that person benefits from a mental health approach too, that's where we come in. So like I said, for example, in a traffic accident, well, say you hit somebody, well, you're still probably going to get a ticket. But if something led you to that, if you're in a bad place, in a dark place, then at least you have that opportunity to speak about it.
Okay.
That's kind of the holistic approach there, because you can deal with both things. They don't have to be mutually exclusive because they rarely are. And when it comes to addictions and mental health, we've learned that you can address both at the same time. And what I mean by that is if the person's in despair, which we know addiction can create, right? That can lead to other issues, other psychological issues. So we can try to work with them towards getting the help they need, but also expressing those concerns about their addiction. And there are programs available here, right? Like a safe injection site or a detox center. They're available for those people. And sometimes maybe they just simply don't know those are available. And we can facilitate that. We can drive them there. We can provide them a safe space. We can try to keep them safe when they're perhaps intoxicated or otherwise under the influence of a substance.
Mental health, in my opinion, has always been a dumping ground. It never got the funding. It didn't get the acknowledgement that it needed. We're finally getting there a little bit because we're in crisis. We've always had periods where we've tried to do better, but historically, as a people, we do it when we're in crisis, right? Mm-hmm. That's how society does things. And we, in my opinion, we're in crisis again. So as a result, we're getting more funding to things. We're getting more training. As new members are coming out, they're getting trained different in mental health. That's becoming a bigger component. We do as much mental health training as we can within the detachment. When members come in, they do their training within RCMP, but as from my end, from that nursing end, what else can I get him trained on?
Prior to this PAC team being initiated, and as somebody in your field, how did you feel that calls were being responded to before the PAC team?
Well, and honestly, they were being responded to as best as they could be. Like, realistically speaking, I didn't work, coming to work with the police gave me so much better understanding of what they're up against on a daily basis. People just really, truly don't realize until you're in it that so many things fall in their lap that shouldn't be in their lap because they're not trained for, they're not prepared for. It is not a police issue. It's not a police problem. But when people have nobody else to turn to, when they don't know who to turn to in a particular situation, well, let's phone the police. Maybe they know. Coming in here and calls being dispatched on the radio saying they want police to come because they can't get their teenage son out of bed to go to school. Not really a police call, but people are phoning in these things, right? So it was fascinating for me to see, and they really truly did the best that they could. In all honesty, working collaboratively with Alberta Health Services and some of the other agencies within town have been phenomenal in the last year, ARAS. We have seen such a huge downturn in calls for service for a lot of our high volume clients because we have managed to connect them to the mental health supports that they need.
When I was general duty, there was a client that was very high volume and high violence, you name it, this client was engaged in it. Of course, over time, we realized that was due to mental health concerns. And we began engaging with both the client and his mom. So we built that relationship in the sense that once I was unpacked, I came with that knowledge of all the times I dealt with this person and his mother. Now, we would go meet with them proactively. We would create that safe space, or just something as simple as driving by and saying hello. Even if they don't want us there, we say hello. There was a good interaction. It was neutral. It was safe. It didn't create a bad memory. It wasn't triggering. And then we move along. Eventually, it got to a point where we could shake hands, have a talk with them, sit down right by the hospital when they're seeking care, but they're nervous to do so fully. They're doing much better. We haven't had calls for service regarding that person in a long time, where it used to be about 50 calls a month. Yeah, so now there are 0. I think people are becoming better at recognizing that there's mental health issues, that there are mental health issues involved when there's a call for service. So often now I've noticed there's a shift in the description of that call. So when someone calls 911, you would describe, of course, what's going on, who are you, who, what, when, where, why, right? So you describe all that. But lately, I've seen a shift where people will be described using different words, such as psychosis, or they're really decompensating, or they really could use medical help. It's no longer, you guys need to come get rid of this person. They could really use some help. And that's nice to see, because, of course, if that awareness is created, then we know how to respond better. And again, we respond to calls unpacked from not necessarily just the homeless community. It is everybody. Yeah. It is someone that lives in the most affluent neighborhood. It can be someone that has not had a place to call home for the last 10 years. As times get harder financially, or just generally for some people, times are getting harder, and with financial troubles comes increased consumption of alcohol or drugs or other issues. People do tend to get more depressed.
Especially nowadays, you guys, people are just living on the edge of that cliff. You know, we're one paycheck away from holy doodle.
Some of us are all just one paycheck away from not knowing where we're going to be.
How important is the permanent shelter? How much is it needed in this community?
It's needed so much. Another misconception is if we build a shelter, they're never going to go out of it to go to treatment or whatever, because why should they, you know? And I always think, how much of an incentive is a mat on the floor? Right? So, oh gosh, we need it.
The city of Red Deer and the province of Alberta need to make a decision about a permanent shelter space and get that going. And stop allowing the loudest voices to make the decisions, because it's not necessarily what's best for the whole community. I know the work that I'm doing with the Lived Experience Council on Homelessness, we've had lots of conversations about how, you know, not having a permanent shelter space creates a sense of hopelessness in the homeless population. Like they're always an afterthought. Like they're the first to get blamed for any issues that are going on downtown, and yet not important enough for a decision to be made about where to put a permanent shelter space.
For a number of years, the city of Red Deer has been unable to find a location for a permanent shelter. A recent report showed the city's homelessness population had more than doubled in the last 5 years. We sat down with City Manager Tara Lodwick to discuss the homelessness crisis in Red Deer and its greater impacts.
So when it comes to shelter, it has been extremely difficult to find a location. And we'll go out to the community and we think we have a great site. And we know we're not going to make everybody happy in the location of this site. The people in the east say put it in the west, the people in the north say put it in the south, and those in the downtown say don't put it in the downtown. So it's been extremely difficult. We know that there are ripple effects to the shelter. And those are things that we've tried to work with the existing shelter where it's at, and do some measures around that within the neighborhood.
So what are some of the ripple effects of homelessness to the community at large in Red Deer?
So you're absolutely correct when you say the community at large. Often we think of the ripple effects as just around where the shelter is, and it is to the community at large. You know, we have cold winters, so the overall community, you'll find people are huddling up in our park system. They are trying to stay warm in properties that we have around the city, and coming onto people's private property to find that place to keep warm. We also find that it has an impact on, there are a few folks who are homeless that do need to keep their addiction up or find ways to do that, and then it has impacts on crime as well as property crime is the big one. When we look at the mitigation strategies, there's grants that are available for property owners who have experienced a cost due to, say, vandalism or cleaning up, any of those types of things, where they can apply to these grants through the Downtown Business Association. And we've increased those. We have additional funds that are going into the downtown for cleanup, as well as for security. We're helping Safe Harbor when it comes to some of the fencing that's around there. The shelter location that we have now is only been meant to be temporary. So it hasn't been built to the standard that we will see with the new shelter. The new shelter will have that housing focus to it. So the goal is that people are not there long and that they're then placed into housing, which then goes to the next piece of the puzzle that we need to really work on in the community, and that's increasing our housing stock. We know that there are many people that we try to place every week. They meet, and there's a list of over 100 folks in our community that need housing. And based on the stock we have, they're only able to place 10 per week. So there's 90 people that are still on that list that don't have a place to go.
Who's going to house these guys? Even if we had housing for them, who's going to house them? What landlord is going to serve this group of people? Very few, and we can't blame them. So we know that there is no housing to refer people to right now, because the housing that these guys need are what is referred to as permanent supportive housing.
So what permanent supported housing does is it puts folks that are experiencing homelessness with a mental health issue in a space where it's staffed and they have that support to help them get to medical appointments, to take medication on time, and whatever other supports that they need to help manage both of those things at the same time. So it creates stability and an environment where that if you're dealing with it, relapse doesn't take over. It's just one more step in the process.
The shelter location process has been one that has been 8 years in the making, and we've been involved in it for a very long time. And it's wearing on staff, it's wearing on me. And it hurts when you see businesses who are upset, and it hurts when you see the vulnerable population that you're trying to help as well. And you want everybody to get along, and to the agencies, they're overworked. Those are tough jobs. You know, they're feeling the stress of it too. So I see all of these people hurting, and it's been extremely difficult to find that solution where we can all not make people happy, but where we can all feel we can move forward. And this is the best solution of all of the options that we have on the table.
This morning was a good example. We had a harbor circle, and we had 120 people in there that came to that circle. And some of them were clients from the shelter, a lot of service providers, some families. And I had told them in the circle when we started that this fight for the new shelter, you know, I heard someone tell me, you know, Hoffman, you're alone in that. Like, you're really alone. And then I just looked around the circle and I said, I beg to differ, you know? So there were 120 lights in that shelter who were shining, you know, for the work that we do and for all the people that need our services. People ask me all the time, how can I help? How can I help? Tell people, you know, shine your light by just having those conversations, you know? It seems like nothing, but it's huge. It can get, I mean, that's what changes things, you know? What did Margaret Mead say? Small, dedicated group of people can change the world. And it's true. We've seen that happen. So come together. And if you don't understand, open up your mind. Come and ask us. Come, you know, come and see. Come and listen. And shine your light over here. Because there's, as I said, there's lots of dark places. We need all the lights. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty powerful. That love stuff works really good.
Yeah.